I speak to you in the name of the one God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Some years ago, I was asked to be the celebrant for a dear friend's daughter's wedding. Now, there's always a story that goes with a wedding, but this particular wedding stood out as exceptional. It was a black tie event, and so under my vestments, I was wearing the clergy equivalent, for women anyway, of a black tie, which included a long skirt and a black velvet waistcoat over my clerical shirt. That particular evening also happened to be my first date with Father Fred, and it was the first time that my congregation would see us together. Now, it was a beautiful wedding. The bride's grandfather, who is also a priest, pronounced the vows. And we celebrated Holy Eucharist with a full house, and the music was just glorious. And then things got to be really interesting. While we were in church celebrating Holy Matrimony and Holy Eucharist, there were all sorts of exciting events going on in the kitchen down the hall that were exactly the wrong sorts of exciting events. As I walked into the sacristy to remove my vestments, a parishioner came running in with the announcement, Mother Natalie, don't tell the mother of the bride. But now the caterer fainted and she had to be taken to the hospital, and now there's no one in the kitchen working on the food, and the cake isn't even assembled, and what are we going to do? As it turns out, the caterer, who was also a friend of the bride's mother, had been working alone, and she had in fact fainted. The ambulance had come and taken her to the hospital. She was diabetic, and she had apparently forgotten to eat that day. And her blood sugar finally dropped low enough that she lost consciousness. Now, fortunately, among the members of the congregation was a woman who was a professional chef, along with her sister, her mother, her father, and I have a fair amount of experience cooking for groups of more than 100. So we rounded everyone up and we rushed down to the kitchen while the pictures were being taken. And the kitchen was a disaster like you would not believe. The lack of focus from low blood sugar had apparently been affecting the caterer for hours. There was nothing that was completed. Our chef friend quickly stacked the layers of the cake one on top of the other and got it into the parish hall, and the rest of us turned on the oven and pulled out the ingredients and started assembling finger food as quickly as we possibly could. The 5 of us worked incredibly hard and fast for the next 4 hours. We stirred and we baked and we made sauces and we assembled trays. We washed dishes to keep plates and wine glasses available for everyone. And then we cleaned the kitchen and put everything away. At the end of that evening, every single item of our fancy black tie outfits was in desperate need of a trip to the dry cleaner. And we had to go home and wash bits of things out of our hair. Fortunately, there was plenty of wine, so we didn't have to work a miracle that evening. But we did manage to salvage a reception for the bride and groom and their families and guests. Fortunately for me, my date still liked me after that experience, and I went home and I was so tired I have no idea how I made it to 8 o'clock Mass the next morning. Like I said, weddings always have a story. Unlike the story I just told you, however, the story of the wedding that comes from St. John's Gospel has eternal significance for us. And there's also a lot more to it than there appears to be on the first reading. Now, we don't have an hour, so I really cannot unpack all the ways that this story connects to the rest of St. John's Gospel, to Genesis, to Revelation, to the resurrection, and a whole host of other things. But what I do want to try and do is help you see how this miracle of Jesus has something important to say to us about the kingdom and how it helps us understand what actually happens in Holy Communion. The miracles or signs that Jesus does in the gospel always point toward the kingdom and the way that the world will look when all of creation has been made new and we live in the presence of God and the Lamb. I think we forget that sometimes. And because as a culture, we're kind of suspicious of miracles and maybe pretty sure they don't happen, we tend to look at them as one-off events that we don't have to deal with and that don't have anything to say to us. And so our attitude alone obscures the real message of the miracles that Jesus does in the Gospels. So this morning, let's do a little bit of digging into what this miracle tries to tell us. The first thing that you should know is that there are actually two wedding feasts going on in this story. There is the wedding feast of a bridegroom and his bride in Cana of Galilee. But the other wedding feast, the one that the gospel wants to point us to, is the wedding feast of the Lamb, the feast of the union of Christ and his bride, the church. The second wedding feast is a theme that runs all the way through the works of St. John in the New Testament, and it finds its fullness in the joyful feast of the kingdom at the end of the book of Revelation. It works kind of like this. The characters and the events in the gospel always, especially in St. John's gospel, always speak of events that happen in Jesus' ministry. And they simultaneously reach out to us, the church, to instruct us and to question us about our faith and our commitment. The story of the wedding in Cana is a wonderful, incredible story of a miracle and a gift to people whose celebration, to people whose joy in life over a big event would be cut short because the party could go on no longer. It is also a story that tells us of Christ's intent to bring joy and celebration to those who follow him. It's the first miracle he performs, according to John. And it is a miracle to bring joy and happiness and not bitterness or hardship. It shows the ultimate reality of what it means to be part of Christ's people. Now, according to historians and archaeologists, the people who lived in Cana were poor, perhaps even poorer than the peasants who surrounded them in the Galilean countryside. So this wedding that Jesus and his mother and his disciples, all of his followers, were attending was likely not a lavish one. But it still would have followed certain customs that were common to Jews in antiquity. The bride and the groom would have been betrothed some years ago. And then at a certain point, they would have performed the first part of the wedding ceremony. And the bride would have gone home to her father and mother's home and stayed there for some indeterminate amount of time until she was later able to bear children. And then the groom would come and get her. They would complete the wedding ceremony at his home, and a week's worth of feasting would begin. Prior to the groom coming to get the bride, both of them would have gone to have a mikvah, a ritual bath that was supposed to cleanse them from all impurities. And then when the groom came to get her and the feasting began, they would have what is known in the Jewish tradition as a simcha, a very joyous occasion. Now think about this a minute. Often we tend to think that bringing in the kingdom is going to be hard and difficult. But Jesus' first miracle is to bring the wine of joy and gladness to a simcha, to celebrate a joyous occasion. The water that becomes wine is a gift to continue the joy of the bride and groom so that it isn't cut short. So on the very most basic level, we can understand this story to tell us that Jesus' presence among us is intended to bring us further joy. But St. John always has another story or conversation in mind in his gospel. And this is the story of Jesus, the incarnate one, and those who believe in him. How does that work in this story? Well, if you look at the wedding feast of the Lamb at the end of the book of Revelation, all of those who get to come to the feast are those who have given their hearts and their lives to Christ. They're the blessed ones. They're the ones who will live eternally in his presence where there is no sorrow, no pain, and no crying. It is the ultimate simcha, or to borrow the title from a book Tony Campolo wrote a long time ago, The Kingdom of God is a party. Christ comes that our joy may be complete. And right here at the beginning of the gospel, Jesus' mother, his first disciple, remember we talked about that at Christmas, the first apostle, the first one to proclaim the good news of Christ. She looks at the servants. And who are the servants? We are also the servants. And she says to them, do whatever he tells you. His mother gives the most important instruction for those who believe in Jesus and wish to be among the blessed who are invited to his party. Do whatever he tells you. Now, the bridegroom at the wedding feast of the Lamb is, of course, Jesus Christ. And you know, the week before this wedding in Cana, he had gone to the Jordan to be baptized. A baptism is a kind of mikvah. And we believers who make up the church, who is his bride, we too have been baptized and prepared for the wedding feast. Don't ever lose sight of this. It doesn't matter how old you are when you were baptized. When you were baptized, you were prepared for union with Christ. Everyone at the wedding in Cana, his mother, his disciples, all the guests, the bride and the groom, they all drink this new wine of great gladness that Jesus gives to them. And we too are invited to a wedding feast to drink that wine. He has come out of love and generosity to make us new again. Because for Christ, there is no life without joy, no living without gladness. And all that is true and good, if we will but believe in it, will bring us that joy and gladness. In a few minutes, we will celebrate Holy Communion. It is our own wedding feast. And Christ will offer each of us a taste of the new wine. In the chalice and the wine that is his blood, we are offered forgiveness that will cleanse and purify us. In the cup that he offers us, we will drink the wine that softens our hardened hearts and that loosens our bondage and sets us free. Every week, that is Christ's gift to us. He poured out himself, every drop of his life, to beat back the chaos that surrounds us, to defeat the works of evil and fear, to wash away everything that keeps us from fulfillment and joy that we were intended to know. And there was no cost so great that he would not pay it to bring us back to himself. He says in the prayers of the Mass, "Drink this, all of you. This is my blood of the new covenant, which will be shed for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins." This is the wine of joy and gladness. Will you not come and drink it with him?